You have to have visionaries. You know, you have to have people that will think outside of the norm.
We have to be given the power to tell our own stories.
We all want to say our piece. This is a crazy time.
What they care about is what it means to them.
You have to not think like society thinks.
This is a fight about power. Who has it and who has the right to use it?
We're having a reckoning about what public safety can, should, and must look like.
It's about a broader question of representation, who gets to create the images and define how we see the world.
They want their voice to be heard, they have to get involved.
Finally, we get to tell our truth and tell our stories like our stories matter.
What's going to bring people together is equality.
The love that we have for each other is the shortcut to true human happiness.
You start to see how it's all connected.
Every single person around the world can create a movement.
Hello, and welcome to day one of our annual Atlantic Festival. I'm Candace Montgomery, the Senior Vice President and General Manager at atlanticLIVE. We are so glad so many of you have joined us virtually from across the country and the world. Our theme for the festival this year is Visions of What America Can Be. After a challenging few years in our nation's politics and culture, we invite you to stay with us over the next 7 days as our Atlantic journalists talk with leaders and visionaries across industries about their ideas for building a better future. Some of these names you'll be familiar with, and others might be new to you, but we hope they are just as inspiring. We want you to know that even though our festival is virtual, there are many ways that you can get involved. You can engage with other attendees via the networking function. You can talk with each other and ask questions for some of our speakers via the chat function. You can visit our Atlantic booth and watch a video which will give you a tour of our event platform. And we have some special exclusives reserved just for Atlantic subscribers. So look out for those and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Before we get started, we want to thank our underwriters who support the Atlantic's journalism and have given us the opportunity to offer the festival for free. Our underwriters are Facebook, our founding level underwriter, Boston Consulting Group, EY, Genentech, Southern Company, and Walton Family Foundation, our presenting level underwriters, Allstate and U.S. Bank as supporting level underwriters, American Federation of Teachers, Barclays, the Janssen Pharmaceutical Companies of Johnson & Johnson, the MacArthur Foundation, PayPal, Salesforce.org, and Truth Initiative as contributing level underwriters. Our exclusive media partner is NBC News. Thank you again. Now let's dive in and enjoy the show.
Please welcome Democratic Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota and Robinson Meyer, an Atlantic staff writer covering climate.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Atlantic Festival. I'm Robinson Meyer. I report on climate change for the Atlantic. I'm also the co-founder of the COVID Tracking Project. And hello, Senator Smith. I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us today at our virtual climate change forum in the Big Story Planet.
Thank you. It's really terrific to be with you. I'm excited for the conversation.
Well, obviously there is a lot to talk about, and it is UN Climate Week, as well as every week is Climate Week, and now it feels like. So let's jump right in. I want to start by asking you, what is happening in Congress right now? We're going to get to the reconciliation bill, but just it seems like we were talking about policy, we were talking about infrastructure for a long time. Suddenly, we're talking about budget stuff and the debt limit. Can you give us a sense of where Congress is and when we're going to get back to the kind of maybe more substantive infrastructure and reconciliation conversations we were having earlier?
Sure. Well, so the context for this is that we are in the middle of passing big, important, transformational legislation. And it's complicated. If it weren't complicated, somebody would have done it a long, long time ago. That holds both for the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as the second part of the legislation that we need to pass, which is the rest of the Build Back Better agenda. So I think it's going to look a little messy for the next few weeks, but I feel really confident that we're going to get this done. I mean, we have to. It is too important not to. And as we work out, exactly where the votes are and exactly where the compromises are, we're going to start to make progress. And I'm kind of with you. I want to talk about the policy, what it is going to be doing for folks, while the kind of the turn of the screw politics is sort of absorbing right now for people who are looking at this and going, what the heck is going on? That's sort of the way it happens as you're putting together big pieces of legislation.
So do I, and we're going to get to the policy in a second. Can you just clear up, like, does Congress need, and do Democratic leaders need Republican votes to raise the debt limit? Is that something they just want?
Well,
what's happening?
I mean, on that issue, we should have Republican support to raise the debt limit. This is like, the Republicans are like, they charged, $1 gazillion on the credit card, along with Democrats. We did it together. And now that bill is here, they're saying, oh, we're opposed to debt. We don't want to pay that. This should be a fundamental issue of being responsible and maintaining the United States creditworthiness. And so as we work through this process, I know that we're going to be expecting them to vote to do this, just as they did during Republican presidents when the debt limit had to be raised. So that's going to be another piece of the puzzle that we're going to be working on. Yeah.
Legally, can it be done without them?
Yes, legally it can be done. Okay. Absolutely. There's nothing in the law or the Constitution that says that both parties have to support doing the responsible thing.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure, because it has become unclear at this point to me as an observer.
Yeah.
What is happening given the legal standpoint. But let's go to the policy. I think you have really championed a number of climate provisions in the reconciliation bill and in the infrastructure bills. Can you tell us about them? Which one do you think is the most important for folks to understand?
Sure. Well, so I start from the place that our current path is completely unsustainable for our health, for our economy, for the planet. And this has been so clear in Minnesota this last summer, as we've experienced record droughts, a fire in the Minnesota boundary waters, which shut down the boundary waters there during the peak season. And Gooseberry Falls, which is a beautiful waterfall going into Lake Superior, has literally dried up to a trickle. Minnesotans get this. And so the question is, what are we going to do about it? I have been championing the Clean Electricity Plan, which would move our power sector to 80% clean energy in about a decade. And it is a positive, practical, progressive strategy to get at one of the biggest contributors to climate pollution. But this isn't just about like, oh, what are we going to sacrifice in order to clean up our planet? This is about putting the United States on the forefront of the clean energy transformation, the technological transformation that is going to be creating trillions of jobs, trillions of economic activity over the next 10 years that we have to be on the leadership edge of.
And how would a mandate, or how would the Clean Energy Performance Plan do that? How would it turn this kind of requirement, these incentives that utilities would be receiving under the plan, to kind of become more and more zero carbon? How would that then put us on the technological forefront?
Well, so here's how it would work. What we would do is to provide an incentive to power generating utilities to add clean power, with the goal of getting on average nationally to 80% clean by 2030. That incentive, that payment to utilities, here's why we do it. Because as utilities are adding clean power, we don't want the price of that capital investment right now to be borne by ratepayers, whether that be families or businesses. So the incentive is used to keep rates low while clean power is being added. A really big part of it is that we know that there's a big variation of where utilities get their power right now. Some have already moved pretty far down the road of having clean power and renewables, and others are just on the beginning of that path. We don't want to penalize those that are at the beginning. So every utility starts from where they are, and then they move forward from there. And we're technology neutral. We don't call winners and losers. We say, if hydropower is great for you, good. If adding wind, if you live in a great wind area, that's good. If you want to do carbon capture and storage, let's make that economically feasible so that that can be what your solution is.
do we have the technical ability to kind of make the change that you're talking about, 80% zero carbon by 2030? Is that something that is technically feasible, regardless of whether there's a policy or not?
It is absolutely technically feasible, and it also is feasible without compromising the resiliency of the grid, without wondering whether you're going to be able to turn the lights on if it's, if it's night or if it's winter, or if the clouds are overhead. This is really, really important because people want to make sure that their power is affordable. They want to make sure that it's reliable, and people want to move to clean power. So that is the great advantage of this. Now, as we move down this path, we're going to be seeing, I think, tremendous innovation in terms of new technologies and in terms of battery storage. And what we want is for that innovation to be happening here in the United States, not in other parts of the world where they're, frankly, a little ahead of us right now in terms of supply chains and in terms of technology.
Are there parts of the bill that would kind of keep that innovation in the United States instead of just having us buy, say, half a country's worth of solar panels from the very efficient, productive Chinese manufacturers that make them today?
Right. Well, there are parts of the bill. In fact, Senator Joe Manchin has been a strong supporter of legislation that would provide incentives for clean energy jobs to be here in the United States. But the biggest advantage to this is that it creates a large domestic market for clean energy. And by creating that market, there is a huge incentive, of course, to bring those jobs, to have those jobs, to create those companies and those supply chains here in the United States. I mean, here's an example of this. In northern Minnesota, Minnesota's Iron Range has long been the center for iron ore mining in this country. And we are starting to see in that part of my state, however, real expansions in solar power. That company can grow here in the United States, and that's what we want to do. And I think that's one of the huge advantages of this clean electricity plan.
It's funny you bring up Senator Manchin. One, he's very hard as an observer to know always where he stands. And in some ways, I'd be curious to know what your view is on that as a senator. But one thing he's said is that, look, we're transitioning anyway. We're going to hit some of these goals in 15 or 20 years, just the way the market is moving. Why do we need to hit them in 10?
Yeah, well, Senator Manchin is right that we are transitioning to clean power. And the reason for that is that it's good for business. It's good for reducing utility costs. And because clean power is domestic power, it contributes to our economic or energy independence. But where I differ with Senator Manchin is that we're not moving there fast enough. And so utilities are not going to get where we need them to go unless we provide this additional support. And we're not going to be able to do this without people seeing increases in utility rates unless we do this kind of program. So yes, we are moving down that path, but not fast enough. Right now, we are at about 40% nationally on average clean power. And to make that leap to 80% in 10 years, it is technically feasible, it is possible, and we can do it. But that's why we need this policy to support that transition.
Do you, Senator Manchin and Sinema have sometimes, I would say, especially Senator Manchin, expressed ambivalence about this plan without always being clear on what their specific criticisms are. Do you know what his kind of demands are, what he wants to see out of this policy? Has he shown those kind of negotiating demands to you?
Well, we are in the middle of a negotiation right now. I'll be really excited to come back and check back in with you. And I don't know, I won't even put a timeline on this. But given that we're in the midst of this negotiation, what I'll just say is that Senator Manchin is a fierce fighter for West Virginia. And I believe that what he's going to be doing is looking to make sure that this clean energy transition is benefiting West Virginia and that West Virginia isn't going to be left behind, just like I don't want Minnesota's Iron Range to be left behind by this transition. I think that that's the power and the strength of this idea, this step that we can take, because it can support communities in West Virginia and in Minnesota and all across the country, because it's not just about creating jobs and opportunity in California and New York. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's about rural power.
You're on the front lines of passing what would be a very big deal piece of legislation if it passed. Probably the most important piece of, in fact, certainly the most important piece of American climate legislation, basically since climate change became a major issue 30 years ago. Climate change is this issue that people care about really deeply and want to do something about. And I'm not going to ask the question I think you might think I'm about to ask. This is something that people care about a lot. What do people not understand? What do Americans who care about climate change not understand about how climate policy is made? Like when it gets to the nuts and bolts of it, what do folks not get?
Yeah, well, that's
or what do you
really
wish they understood?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think that one way of answering that question is to observe that energy policy in this country has always been driven by regional differences and where natural resources come from and where members of Congress who are looking to support jobs and economic growth in their own states. And so that has become a very regional issue. I think that people don't understand, including some policymakers, frankly, that the power of renewable energy and clean energy is located in parts of the country that have traditionally been really dependent on fossil fuel. I think I read that 19 out of the 20, you take 19 out of the 20 reddest congressional districts, those are the places with the greatest potential for untapped wind and solar power. So that's an example of how you need to kind of shift your thinking as we're making this this pretty incredible transition to clean power. The other thing I think people don't always understand is so often our conversations about climate and climate change and the climate crisis are couched in a real sense of doom and gloom. And we do need to be deeply, deeply worried. If we don't take action, we have massive problems ahead of us. We're experiencing those problems right now. With the level of extreme weather events that are costing us billions of dollars. But what people, I think, don't focus on enough is the opportunity if we seize the moment, the opportunity if we move to the forefront of this transition and what that can mean for creating jobs and economic growth. That, I think, isn't a part of the story that's told enough.
Is it, one thing that I think holds people back from caring about climate change or getting really involved in climate change is that they think, well, it's just too late. Look at all these disasters that you're citing. We're seeing billions of dollars of costs already. We know it's getting worse. Is it too late for climate action? Should we just let bygones be bygones at this point?
It is not too late. It is absolutely not too late. And the United Nations study that came out, the IPCC report that came out just a month or so ago certainly painted a grim picture, a dire picture. But it showed us also that if we take action, if we marshal the incredible resources of our country and of the whole globe, that we can make incredible progress. And I think it also showed us that the cost of inaction is so great that this is not as if this is something that we can just avoid. It is something that we have to really take, we have to take kind of the bull by the horns and go for
it. What do you think is the biggest reason that we haven't tackled this so far? This is kind of getting in the question you were just talking about, but is it because there's just opposition from industries that might suffer? Is it because folks are scared of the kind of pace of economic change we need?
Yeah. Well, I think it is, I want to just acknowledge at the beginning that the idea of a clean electricity plan, a clean electricity standard, actually started out as a bipartisan issue. Back in the early 2000s, before I was in the Senate, there was a clean electricity standard that was actually sponsored by Lindsey Graham. So it has a history and a tradition of bipartisanship. But why are we so stymied right now? I don't mean to sound cynical about this, but let's be honest. The fossil fuel industry has spent untold resources trying to protect its market dominance. And we have seen this in its not only in its contributions to political leaders, especially on the Republican side, but also in terms of the disinformation that it has put out about the impacts of fossil fuel on climate, and the fact that climate is caused by human activity and that we need to take bold action to stop it. So I think that power we are still living with today, and it has been, in my mind, it's been a very destructive power, and it's really held us back from taking the action that we have to take. We have to stand up to that.
Last question, and then I will let you go. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time. But classic audience question I want to get to. You know, so many economists say a carbon fee or a carbon fee or dividend or a carbon tax is the most efficient, most effective way to respond to climate change. Why a clean energy performance plan and not a carbon fee and dividend or a carbon price?
Yeah, well, so I'll just note that in the draft reconciliation plans, we have a propane fee, which would get at the deep impact of, excuse me, not propane, but a methane fee, pardon me, a methane get at the deep impact of, and is a form of a carbon tax. What I would say is that, the question about a carbon tax is who pays. And the challenge is that what it has the impact of doing is raising energy prices, and those prices are disproportionately passed along to people, often lower income people, who are paying a bigger percentage of their income on energy. Now, if you organize some sort of a tax and dividend strategy, which is actually not under consideration right now, that is a way of getting around that question of who pays, but it also is complicated and it's a little kludgy. It doesn't work as smoothly as I think the Clean Electricity Plan does. And it doesn't serve the value that we want, which is to add clean while we're keeping utility energy prices low for American consumers and American businesses, that's just a win-win.
In other words, the whole thing with a carbon price is you are meant to make energy prices go up, and kind of the goal of a CEPP is that energy prices don't go up for consumers in the same way.
Right, exactly. Energy prices don't go up while you were accomplishing the goal of adding clean power. And of course, as you know so well, the adding clean power cleans up the electricity sector, but as we electrify transportation and building, heating and cooling, then it has that beneficial impact of helping to clean up other sectors of the economy that also contribute to carbon pollution.
That's such a great point. The electricity sector is the kind of linchpin sector for the rest of our decarbonization strategy, and it seems like everyone agrees on that at this point. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but Senator Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Next up, Rob Meyer is joined by James Puerini, a wildland firefighter in Oregon and graduate researcher in wildfire management.
James, thank you so much for joining us. We have a little club going, so welcome to Club Atlantic. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited you're here. I feel like you got to be on the front lines of a climate impact this past summer, and now you can tell us about it. So you were actually a firefighter this year in Oregon. What did you see, and how did it compare to things you've seen in the past?
Yeah, so first of all, Rob, thank you so much for having me. They're working you hard today. It sounds like you have quite a busy day, so I hope that your day is going good too. So yeah, so let's talk about this fire season. So first of all, I got into fire when I was 18 years old, and I started in the world of wildland fire as a way to help pay for tuition, like many seasonal employees. From there, I left that arena and went and worked for the federal government for a while for my home state member of Congress in Oregon, and went off to Washington, D.C. to do that, and worked for the Nature Conservancy and other organizations doing fire-wise planning. So for my world, I spent a lot of my teens and early 20s doing suppression wildland fire, and then I left for quite a long time, and then I came back. And so the differences in what I've been seeing this year are pretty stark, and again, anecdotal, right? So we're going to talk about these changes in anecdotal ways and from a personal experience. But I guess what I could say is I worked on a hell attack crew, right? So we would fly to fires and do what's called initial attack. Initial attack is when you sort of do the first response to fires. You get to the fire, you assess the need for additional resources to suppress the fire, and then you sort of respond in kind. And so what I was seeing here versus maybe a decade ago, this year, is that fire behavior has changed markedly. So what we're sort of noticing, especially this year, was very, very dry fuels. I'm a graduate researcher now doing wildfire management, and at the very start of the year, you started to see things like drought. You started to see things like low snowpack. Here in my home state of Oregon, you saw issues in the Klamath Basin where users up and downstream were being asked to use a bit less water, right? And all of that for seasonal wildland fires were indicators of, oh, geez, this could be bad. This could look a lot like last year, potentially worse. Who knows? And so the way that plays out with
what does drought? Yeah, it sounds like this is exactly what you're going into. But when you start to see these drought conditions, you start to see fuels get drier. Like, what does that mean in terms of fire behavior? Like, how did that then, I guess, inform the summer that you saw next?
Yeah, as sort of foresters and fire ecologists, forest ecologists, we look at those indicators that are early season indicators as sort of premonitions, right? So this is our sort of look into what we think the season might look like. So when we see those early season indicators, we think, okay, the hazardous situations are there for a situation where you get fire that moves on the ground, into shrub, into canopies, where you get these large crowning fires that we refer to as our catastrophic incidents a lot of the time. So, of course, there's a lot of this discourse about good fire, bad fire that is very relevant to these conversations. And what we're talking about now is this sort of raging catastrophic fire that we see oftentimes with these very dry conditions, and you really see it on the ground, right? The pine needles on the pines start to dry up on green trees. You take steps on the ground as you're doing your hikes, and you see the grass crunch underneath you, and you just look at these situations, and having seen them several times on the ground in fire behavior, you think a spark, some wind, and you could really find yourself in a situation where these fires could get dramatically out of control. And so when you have these drought conditions, it's often indicators of at least within the fire season itself in the summer season, indicators that you could be getting sort of extreme fire behavior, which of course is very different from the sort of moderate, slow creeping, good fire that our trees, forests, and ecosystems are really adapted to and really need to flourish.
And did you see those? I think I cut you off when you were just about to say this earlier, but did you see that kind of explosive fire action this year, especially compared to maybe 6 or 7 years ago when you were last doing wildland firefighting?
So I think yes, and I will say that when suppression fire resources go out, you hope that they go out to address fires where there are structures threatened, there is the chance of catastrophic fire. So oftentimes what we see even 10 years ago was that we would get sent to the worst incidents, right? Like like in the world of ICU nurses and people that work in trauma care, they're seeing the sort of worst effects of COVID-19 directly. We're sort of a lot of the time seeing the most catastrophic incidents of fire up close. So yeah, especially from the air, again, working in aviation, you see trees crowning, you see a lot of the impacts at a landscape scale. So our vantage point, and especially the vantage point of people who work in aviation, is that we really get to see the full fire. And when you get to see the full fire, you get to see a lot of those fire impacts. So even after the fire, you can sort of assess what you're seeing, and a lot of the times you'll see landscapes that are wicked that turn into moonscapes. And in good situations, in situations that I saw across the state of Oregon this year, we also saw incidents where the fire impacts or the fire effects were fairly good, where we saw that sort of low creeping ground fire that we sort of associate with good fire, that we need more of and that we need implemented on the ground. So it was a combination. I will say this year, as opposed to previous years, again, a decade ago, I saw a bit more of the extreme fire behavior, but not something that you could necessarily directly associate with the impacts of a climate change or of a drought. We're definitely seeing both, and definitely indicators of that sort of extreme behavior written all over the records and the data that we have.
Yeah, you anticipated my next question perfectly, which is how much of what you're seeing do you think is kind of an indicator of climate change? I mean, clearly there's been this explosion of fire in the West over the past 4 or 5 years. How much of that seems to signify the kind of arrival of climate change, be it drought indicators or precipitation indicators, versus kind of us reaping what we're sowing in terms of a long-term suppression-based fire management regime?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for climatologists, for forest ecologists, and people in fire, it's a question where the dots and the connections are starting to be made, and they're starting to be made in publishable formats. So we're starting to see that direct connection. On the ground, of course, we see indicators of this in drought and conditions that are very extreme, high winds that we haven't seen in a very long time in the state of Oregon, and sort of starting to make those connections in the literature. I will say, and you alluded to this too, is that the fire problem is a complex problem, and it can't start or end with climate change, right? Of course, we have to address the worst impacts of climate change. We also need to address a massive fuels issue that we have across the country that was based on the erasure of indigenous people and the start of our culture of fire suppression that really began as soon as 1910, where there were major fires that sort of unsettled the public, and that led to a culture of fire suppression. In addition to that, we have to think about zoning and where we build homes, right? These are sort of full systems approaches that we have to look at. Of course, climate change is a central argument within that, but we really do have to look at how foresters, silviculturists, and other people like forest workers can be involved directly as people who are helping to mitigate and adapt to the worst impacts of climate change.
I want to get to this discussion in a second because I think it's so important, but I want to just touch, before we fully move on from your firefighting experience, you know, you've worked on fire policy in DC, and you've also fought fires on the ground. And I think that's two distinctive sets of experiences that very few people have individually, and even fewer people have when you combine them together. So how did being doing wildland firefighting in Oregon then change how you or make you think about what folks who work on policy all the time or think about these kind of big national solutions are missing in terms of when we go about think about the kind of next 50 years of fire policy or climate policy?
Yeah, so I think you're well aware that Capitol Hill is a wacky world, right? And it's a world that moves very quickly, and it's a world that moves in big numbers. And oftentimes, and the way that I see it is sometimes that sort of overshadows the human impacts that it really touch down on people's lives. I know that the members of Congress that I worked for cared deeply and intimately about the human impacts of the work that they were doing, but we're still talking about big dollars and how they impact people in their lives, in their communities. And so starting my career as a seasonal wildland firefighter, meeting people who had lost property in catastrophic fires, meeting practitioners who were implementing good fire treatments and who were connected to ecology and traditional knowledge and really rooted in place was something that helped inform work that goes on in Capitol Hill. So I worked a lot in administrative work, and I also worked on things like the FEMA federal borrowing fix, which is really an effort to sort of open up pathways so that when the agencies run out of money, they can pull into different pots and create things that help to address the suppression issue at hand, right? So it's a way to sort of reallocate money so that we're not having to go to Congress every single time when we need that funding. So those are sort of band-aids, right? The exciting part that I'll get at really, really quickly is that with the growth of understanding about what prescribed fire and how and how sort of active treatments can affect land, you're starting to see new legislation, exciting legislation like the Prescribed Fire Act of 2020 and the 21st Century Civilian Conservation Corps, concepts that are exciting, they're innovative, they're visionary in a lot of ways, and they're hopefully paving the way for a more broad-scale, holistic connection to land for people and practitioners who want to do the sort of good thing by putting good fire on the ground and implementing good treatments.
A quick question. Is Capitol Hill so wacky that you found yourself getting sucked into those kinds of ways of thinking about dollars and cents? Then you were like, oh, right, I've experienced this in person. Or, you know, once you fight a wildland fire, you're like, it's just kind of part of who you are for life. You didn't forget it after that.
I loved working on Capitol Hill, and there's a very good reason why I went back home to serve my community, sort of rooted in the place that I work in. So yes, the sort of landscape scale, large dollars, you make great impact when you can get that work done. And for me, it is a challenging environment, right? Things move very slowly. And as someone who worked on the ground, I like to see things right in front of me. So for the people who are gutting it out and who are doing this sort of good work on Capitol Hill to advance things like prescribed fire and Civilian Conservation Corps, other concepts that really look directly at fuels treatments and ways to creatively adapt and mitigate climate change, I'm thrilled for them. For me, I want my boots in the dirt, and I want to be digging in the dirt too. So,
what does our conversation miss about fires? You know, I feel like from some folks you hear, oh, we have to do more prescribed burns, we're not burning enough. From other folks you hear, oh, we got to manage fuels. Do you feel like the conversation on wildland fires is getting better in the US? Do you feel like anyone has kind of cracked the nut of talking about the set of resources we need to fix it?
Yes, absolutely. And this is the real exciting part, and this is the reason for hope, right? Is that the discourse and the dialogue around fire has improved enormously. The reporting on fire has improved enormously. The public consciousness about fire and about our fuels issues across the West has improved enormously. These are things that we've made great strides on. And the next step, the next natural step, is to sort of pave the way to create solutions, hopefully, right? So things like implementing more prescribed fire. There's a bill on the governor's desk right now in the state of California that would sort of advance and create pathways for more leadership for Indigenous fire practitioners to do that. There's a bill on the governor's desk that would, in the state of California again, that would make it easier for people by changing the liability standards on basically burn bosses, the people that implement these treatments, to be able to do more fire without absorbing the liability of that. So there are things that are good that are happening. There are concepts, again, like the new Civilian Conservation Corps that are looking at thinking about, okay, we're treating things at the scale of thousands of acres. Let's think more visionary. Let's think about millions of acres, which is really the scale of the problem that we're seeing. So you're starting to see these things happening where we're scaling up to the solutions that we're really looking for.
How would a Civilian Climate Corps help here? Because I think it's a big demand of the Sunrise Movement and kind of other progressive climate organizations. They're actually big. They're a big demand for the reconciliation bill, for the kind of soft infrastructure bill that Congress is working on. Would that make a difference? How would that work on the ground? Like, should we really be sending hundreds of 22 and 23-year-olds into the woods to, like, I don't know, build? What are they going to do?
Yeah, so I know I'm out of time. I'm close to out of time here. There's
You're
something
close,
I actually
but I got, yeah.
So I was talking to a friend of mine about this a couple of months ago, and he actually sent me his grandfather's slip from the Civilian Conservation Corps. I want to read it really, really quickly. By this, all will know that Orson, I'll just use his first name, of course, 1930s, his name was Orson. By this, all will know Orson served his country well as a member of the Civilian Conservation Corps, that magnificent army of youth and peace that put into action the awakening of the people to the facts of conservation and recreation, and that with all honors he completed his tour of service, at Glacier National Park, September 25th, 1934, right? So what I'm getting at there is that the spirit of service and the ability to create good jobs, union jobs, is a very exciting concept. And to connect young people to the land, connect people to a spirit of service in the sort of world that we live in, where there's challenges economically, where people are looking for good paying union jobs, where we sort of need a better connection to place and land. Getting people out to working in the woods is a fantastic idea. And FDR's
what would they do in the woods? Yeah, I like what I think you know, those are great skills, but like what would people do when they get into the woods? Is there work that can be done that would maybe reduce the amount of fire we see?
There's effectively a consensus in the fire community and the forestry community, and that consensus is that a combination of prescribed fire treatments and select manual thinnings in place that are localized and that sort of make sense to the ecology of an environment, piece together, lower the catastrophic fire impacts. Again, these things are happening all over the place at different agencies. They're happening at the scale of thousands of acres. And we really need to be visionary about the way that we think about this, scaling this up so that these solutions start to get larger and broader, including more and a more diverse range of people who are involved in it. So those people feel connected to it, so that we're creating jobs. And so those jobs create meaningful change in the ecosystems that we have. The way that forestry works, yeah.
No. I think are those the kinds of jobs that you think it's feasible for semi-trained, you know, the young folks who would go out with the Civilian Conservation Corps would be able to do?
Oh yeah, the job training already exists, right? Like the Jobs Corps, AmeriCorps, these programs are already in place, right? The current legislation that's here, again, FDR's program of work in the 1930s was enormously popular across the political spectrum. These were not controversial things. We put people into the woods, we democratized the outdoors, we created efforts that sort of made conservation a widespread knowledge across the country. I think that there's massive interest in this. As a matter of fact, an organization called Data for Progress recently did some polling on this, and they found it was hugely popular among young people, that there was an enormous amount of young people who would be willing, interested in these good paying jobs where they got to sort of explore the outdoors and do labor that contributed in service to their country.
There's an audience question I want to get to, which is just about the technical aspect of firefighting, which is to what extent sensing, which an audience member asked in terms of drones or satellites, but I guess could also be in terms of the helicopter you were riding on, used to help assess forest fire risk. Is remote sensing used to kind of help assess forest fire risk beforehand? Is it a useful tool? Like, has our increasing sensing technology really changed the battle against fires in any way?
So you asked the forester a question that I love, and yes, absolutely, the technology that's sort of increasing and improving across the country. We're at a place now where we can do really incredible things with things like LiDAR and remote sensing. NASA has a program that looks specifically at fire that's really neat at the Jet Propulsion Lab. The Forest Service is doing really incredible things across the states. There are really amazing things that help sort of assess the risk that fires pose, so that we know which fires are good fires to put out, which fires are good fires to monitor, what to sort of look for when we're looking for indicators of catastrophic fire. This helps inform everybody, and it helps inform the way that we sort of work, so that we're minimizing damage to people and property, and so that we're allowing sort of good fire to be good fire in those landscapes as well.
What's the most under-attended to part of the fire puzzle? You know, we were talking about policy, and there's bills out there. You know, what's the part of fire that you're most worried about going forward, or that people who care about this should kind of think about or work on the most?
Yeah, I think the issue that I think about most is that fire season to fire season, we're sort of looking at these as catastrophe to catastrophe, right? We're seeing the worst impacts of fire, and we're addressing these issues almost regressively, right? Like we're spending a lot of money on suppression, and that underscores the massive need to do good treatments that are proactive, and again, that get people working in the woods in those off-season years, right? Like we create this enormous ephemeral seasonal workforce to do suppression fire. And what would be more useful is a workforce that is full-time, employed with benefits, with skills that are cultivated over years and years, who are happy in their place, who know the land that they're working in, and who are working proactively to put treatments on the ground, again, with drip torches and chainsaws out in the woods, doing the good work to manage fuels. So I think the emphasis on a suppression season that is nasty and that is growing worse and worse every season, it seems. Of course, we have to address those impacts directly, but from my perspective, we have to do a better job of thinking more holistically about the way that we live with fire, and how to sort of make that a more year-round thinking.
That's really interesting, and I think it's good to put that in terms of the workforce too, because everyone wants to talk about the way we live with something, but often the way we live with a problem is hiring people to deal with it the whole year round. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to leave it there. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to talking soon.
Thanks, Rob. I'll see you soon.
We have many more events in store at the Atlantic Festival over the next week, so we hope you'll stay tuning in. Check out our schedule for more details. And while you're here, I want to plug my weekly newsletter about climate change. It's called Appropriately, The Weekly Planet. If you go to my Twitter, which is twitter.com/yayitsrob, or if you click the subscribe link in the chat, or visit theatlantic.com/planet, that's theatlantic.com/planet, you'll be able to subscribe. It's free. It comes every week, and I hope you'll join me in kind of my journey there, thinking about climate change and trying to give you a good guide to how it plays out every week. Hey, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you at another Atlantic Festival event real soon. Thanks.
Select the networking icon located on the left-hand side of the screen. Next, click